Hi there, hello, my name's Lance, it's great to see you. Now today we're going to be going through how to draw hair. So we'll go through how to break the hair down into, firstly, simple shapes. So we'll do it in 3 zones: the front, the sides, and the back. We'll then also go through how to give it some texture and feathering to make it look like hair. And then once we've done that, we'll go through that within the context of a full illustration, going all the way from sketch, line art, colouring, and post-processing. And we'll use that as a way of demonstrating all the things we've gone over, like how to have the hair affected by gravity, what to do when the hair contacts something like the ground, and that kind of thing. So with that then, once we've done that, we'll also be including some homework, where you can apply these yourself to the figures we've done here. Now you can do the same hairdos from the video, or you can do your own ones. Ideally, whatever you want to go with is what we'll see from you in the Discord. So once you've finished it, feel free to pop over, post it there, or post some of your other art. We'd love to see your work. And if you like this video and want to see more videos like it, then of course consider becoming a patron. And I want to say thank you to everyone who already has. That's been wonderful. And there's also been some questions around whether I'll be running one-on-one tutoring or things like small group classes. Small group classes are in the works. We're just currently figuring out what sort of things would work for the community content-wise for those who would be doing them. So if you have any ideas for that or for any of the future videos, leave that in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. I'm very active in there. I'll make sure to read through all of them, so if you have an idea, I'll be delighted to hear it. So with that then, let's get stuck into actually drawing the hair. So the first thing would be how we're going to be doing it. So this will be a very simple method. You've probably seen this a few times, where we'll have just our head and then we'll break the hair up into zones. We'll have the front hair, which I'll have in green here, and then we'll have the side hair, which sort of frames the face in red, and then we'll have the back hair in blue. And then we'll have extras like hair buns, a hoge, all those sort of things. And once we've done those zones, we'll go through how to feather that out, how to texture it, and how to make it look like hair and not just those base shapes. Now another thing I want to talk about is rhythm. This is going to be very important for how we draw hair. So here we've got a piece with 3 mountains and 2 clouds. It doesn't look like mountains and clouds. It's too mechanical. They're all the same size, they're all the same distance. Now if we use those same elements, so for instance we vary the size of the triangles, we let them overlap, we give them different spacing between them, and the clouds, we give them different sized sort of curves around the edges, and we space them apart, we have the same elements, but if we give it a more organic rhythm, we now have a landscape. Now how does this apply to hair? So let's do a quick one here. We'll do the zones quickly of front, sides, and back hair, and some accessories. Now we'll get into how to compose those in a sec, but I wanted to go through the importance of that rhythm, how it applies to hair. So we'll do one with an organic rhythm, and one with a very inorganic rhythm, to show you the difference that creates in how you draw your hair and how important it is. So let's draw one here with a really mechanical shapes to it. So all the little pieces of hair are the same size. But then, if we have the other hair, and we use lots of different sized pieces, some straight sections, you'll see how much of a different impression that creates, and how much more it looks like hair, and how much more depth it gives the figure as well. But these figures are essentially the same. The hair is the same shape, the same volume, the face is the same, but the difference is immediately apparent. Now the other thing that's important about hair, one of the key characteristics, is how it's affected by gravity. So similar to how we had in the part of the figure drawing tutorial on how to draw breasts, they're very different from a lot of the body because what primarily defines their shape is gravity. So you can see here, if you've got a ponytail, the top of it is pulled on a lot by the length of the hair, but the bottom isn't pulled on at all. That's why you'll get curl at the bottom. So let's do an example where we'll get a couple of twin tails, and we'll think of the zones here of how much weight they're holding. So up at the very top, it's got 3 units of weight. So the top unit there is going to have a lot of pull, so it's going to be straight. But as we go down the side there, you'll notice we'll have more and more of the curl become apparent. So we'll just quickly put together a figure here to put those ponytails on so we can contextualize them. And so starting out, you can see we have fairly straight hair, but then the middle section, there's less weight, so we can have more curve. And then when we get to the bottom section, we don't have anything attached underneath that section of hair, so it's entirely defined by its curl. So it'll be defined by how curly it is, but also the curl will change expression based on how much weight is expressed on it. And then as we go over it, again, this is that expression of rhythm. So the rhythm will define how much thickness. We won't have it all uniform thickness, we'll have it go thick and thin and behave a lot more like a ribbon. And then what we might also do is just add some cute ears on top, just because they look nice and will go with the rest of the image. Maybe make the expression a bit more smug. And here I realise I've gotten distracted from the lesson, and we'll get back on track. So one of the other things you'll see is how to have the hair break away. So quite often you'll imagine it as a road with not all the drivers sticking to the road. Some of them will go out wide. And if you then use this sort of path idea for those bits of hair that come away and then caught. Now the similar thing will happen with things like hair when it hits a surface. So just like how hair, when it's not affected by gravity, will curl, once it's lying on a surface, it's entirely defined by its curl. So it'll spill and then curve. Now, another thing that I think could do with a bit of attention is a lot of people have a bit of a daunting feeling doing a lot of hair, with a lot of hair having a bit of curl to it. It can be a bit much. So let's start then with a character. We'll go for more of a sort of ara kind of character. And then we'll do some curly hair on it, and we'll start very simply. So we'll do just some simple lines. So we're not even going to do rhythms, we're just going to define where we want the hair to be roughly and how we want it to behave just with some lines. We're not going to do anything more than that. Now, once we've got them in place, let's turn those lines into ribbons by adding another line that goes alongside them and sometimes crosses over. And with that then, we can get some very basic shapes in for how we want the hair to be. And so you can see then it's just a very short step from lines to ribbons. And once we have then the ribbons in, we can apply what we've talked about before with rhythm in how we break up the hair. So break it up into irregular sized pieces, break it up into irregular shapes, and keeping again in mind how gravity is going to make it behave. You can see up around the top of the head there, we have no real curls at all. It's all pretty flat. But then as we move down the figure, you can see the curls become more pronounced. As there's nothing on them pulling them down, they can then curl as much as they want. We can also show some of that spill or some of that sort of hair turning a corner and how to break it away to help feather out the hair and give it a more organic structure. And then we can even merge some sections as well in together, and we can also split them apart. So starting with lines, then to ribbons, and then detailing. So let's put all this together in a set of illustrations. These will be primarily sort of shorter hair, but I want to go through how we're going to structure those three sections of hair. So we'll just do a few heads, and we'll get them ready. Now, normally you wouldn't have the heads completed and sort of detailed to this level without even starting on the hair. You do the hair as you go in a more organic fashion, but we're going to be doing just the hair, so I want the figures to have a bit of finish so that when we've got the hair finished, they won't look out of place. So we're going to do a few here, and we'll have a few in that bottom left corner there. They're going to be ready for things like accessories, like horns or animal ears. You can see the ones for the animal ears, I'm drawing some lines up from the eyes as sort of guidelines on where to place the ears. Now, for the hair, first thing is to decide where the hair's origin will be. You can do a line of a part and have it spread out from that, or you can have it come from a single point and radiate out from that one single point. And you can also add some guidelines radiating out from them to give you a bit of a sort of setup on where to have that hair flow from. I like sort of center part, but you can do side parts, you can do all coming from one point if you want. That's up to you. So the next thing I'm going to do is start on the front hair. So we're going to do that in green, and we're going to put some arrows in there to show the flow of it. Now you don't actually have to draw these, of course. They're just there for this exercise to keep that flow front of mind. And so we're just doing them either massa starting in the middle or having a split in the middle to show the forehead, or we can have, like with that one on the hoodie, sort of a flat end to them so they're not sort of pointed. And then on the bottom right, we're going to leave some spaces to accommodate horns that we're going to add later. And now we can move on to the hair that frames the face, so the middle or sides. And so here we'll either have hair that frames the face, and it can overlap. You can see in a lot of these it'll overlap the sides of the front hair. That layering is a great way to give yourself some depth and dimensionality in the hair you do. And then we can also do things like, a ponytail coming from there as well. Now you'll also notice the one on the top left and the top right are basically the same one, but with different amounts of length and volume, and that can change how it expresses. After that, we can add maybe just a very small amount. So you can see in those 4 in the bottom left corner, the side hair on the one of them with the sort of normal ears is almost non-existent, whereas the one next to it has very long ones, and they both work. We also have things like some bangs that come down on the side on the character in the bottom left there, where they sort of zigzag back and forth. Now that's part of that flow, where the further you get down the hair from where it attaches, the more it can move left and right, and the more it can curl because it has less weight on it. So now we can move on to the hair at the back. So we'll start at the top left, and we'll go with just very simple shapes. A lot of them are going to really be defined by how we feather and texture them later. For now, what we really just want to decide on is volume and flow. So for instance, this one here we've got top center. That one's going to all be flowing towards where the hair is tied back for like a bun or a ponytail. But then we see the figure just to the right of it, and she doesn't have any hair at the back. Also remembering that the bun itself will have its own flow, its own direction as it's wound around. And now as we move into the bottom section, the one on the bottom left there, we're going to go for very long straight hair that's going to sort of fan out. And now we'll do the same thing on the girl with the long sort of fishy ears. And then the characters under it, we might do a combination. So we can see on this girl here, we'll do sort of a Geralt. So it's got tied back on the top half, but loose down below with a bun behind. Or we can do another classic, which is the short sort of twin tails. So we'll have the hair gathering up in 2 places to each of the sides to make 2 sort of short little ponytails on the side there. And they'll have their own flow moving towards where they're tied and then falling down. Or, like the girl with the hoodie here, we've got one big long ponytail that comes down that has a single bit of flow. Or we can have hair fanning out. So similar, once it's got less gravity on it, it can move more. So you'll see it'll widen towards the bottom of any given sort of body of hair. And then this one here, second from the right, with the 2 long twin tails, that same principle is in effect, where as the hair has less weight on it, it's able to spread out and curl more. And then we can add, similar to the Pollyanna on the one there, on the bottom left, on the right there, we can give this one a little ponytail out to the side, and then lots of long hair that curls more the further it gets from the body. And we're just nailing out the very simple shapes to it. Now with those done, we can then start adding things like the accessories. So these would be things that are sort of independent of the rest of the points of the hair. So that's the little sort of tuft on top, or the ponytail, maybe some loose bits of hair that poke out. Maybe they won't have any, they don't have to. Or maybe you want to add a little ponytail up top to make them, like a little cute one. Or it can also be things like horns. So you can see in the bottom left there, we're adding horns to them. Typically you'll add them beside the hair that frames the face. Behind the hair that frames the face. But you can add them further to the back, and of course further to the front if you want. It's just that's one of the easiest spots to slot them in. And it matches if you're adding things like animal ears. So on the bottom 2 there, we'll add sort of fox or cat ears to those. And you can see we've built guidelines up from the eyes around to the top of the head to help us place them right, so they're lined up correctly. And as we move over then to the right, we'll see some characters don't really have much of anything at all there. But then we have that character on the bottom right, and that's those gaps we left in the hair there to accommodate for those horns. So now let's make them a bit more transparent, and we'll go over and start doing the detailing in. So again, this is just what we've gone over before, where we're feathering it out. We're trying to keep an organic rhythm to it. So anytime we use a piece of a certain size and distance, we don't use that piece size or distance again. We do a new size and distance to keep it organic, to keep it irregular. You can also see one of the things we'll be doing a lot of as we go over these is skipping a lot of the lines we used in construction and even merging some parts of it. So this one here with the mohawk is going to be a prime example of that. We're going to merge all those 3 pieces together into one big solid mohawk. And we're also going to treat the hair a little differently. So this one, we want the hair to be rougher. We want it to be spikier and wilder. So we'll have more bits breaking away, and the curl will be stronger, so it'll stick up more. And since the hair is really short, a lot of that will be very pronounced. And then doing a little ponytail thing on the bottom there, and adding in the hairline where the hair will start from. So if they've got like a shaved head, you'll also want to do maybe the short sort of stubbly hair around the sides. And then we have this character here. We're going to remember that we've got the front hair being layered over by the hair at the sides. So it's going to tuck underneath. And that layering is a great way to add that depth to it. And then as we go, we're adding more feathering in the sort of the crevices between the larger masses. And then remembering the flow on that hair bun as well, and having little flyaways come out, especially behind the neck. That little bit of hair that comes out on the back of the neck there is a really sort of a good point of appeal, so it's worth paying attention to. Now, the other thing to remember is things like a loose ponytail like this. You'll see the hair sort of spill out a little bit before it gets constrained in by the ponytail, and that's a good way to show that flow of the hair being disrupted by the hair tie there. And again, like the other one, we'll have a bit of stubble on the side of the head, and we'll feather out the ponytail. Now this is again that classic one. You'll see this again quite a lot, like it's in a lot of the Fate series. It's one of the classic ways of constructing hair, and you'll see this almost this exact hairdo all the time, with the 3 main sections at the front, 2 bits of hair framing the face, and then medium length hair at the back. It should have a name to it, not that I know it, but we'll just get that there, and we'll see we're also merging the massive hair at the front with part of the hair that frames the face as well. So don't be afraid to merge the pieces in together. You're just trying to get the shapes in with those masses of hair. You don't have to actually stick to them and define them as hard-edged. They can merge with each other, of course. And here, what we're also going to do is start mixing in some straight lines in that. So it won't all be feathered in points. Some of it will be feathered, and some of it will have straight sections where the hair is all the same length and is lined up. And then as we do the horns in, we'll also detail the horns a little bit and do the flow of the hair, remembering to have that irregular rhythm to the sections of hair. And we can also feather it more or less. So on this one here, we'll give it a bit more feathering to the hair to make it more sort of 90s style anime, when you had a lot of that, a lot more high detail in the fringes of the hair, and a lot more sort of straight hair. And we'll do horns on that one as well, but more sort of even thickness, and throw a little bit of detail around the base there. And you can see again, we're doing the horns that sit between the hair that frames the face and the hair at the back. Of course, you can put the horns closer to the front, but that's one of the more standard ones. And it's the same as, like we can see here, where we're going to place the animal ears, which sit behind then the hair that frames the face. And so for that, we're going to keep that same irregular rhythm with how we do the tufts, and we're doing that same curling of the hair towards the bottom where it has no more weight applied to it. And then there's that Pollyanna where we have the hair gathering up to a bun and then being tied down. In this one, we'll do again a lot more of a sort of a 90s style to it, so a lot more being broken up and a lot more sort of feathering there, and then adding the cat ears on top, again with that tuft in the middle, and gathering the hair in towards those 2 ponytails, and feathering it out and having the hair sort of overlap each other and go in different directions to give it that feeling, that organic sort of feeling to the hair. Now with that one, we'll do a more sort of simple one here, and again doing some straight lines along the fringe that help break up those shapes. So not just being broken up from different sizes of points to it, but being broken up for whether they have points at all. And then gathering the hair up towards where that sort of scrunchie would be, and then differentiating the top part of the ponytail there, where the different sort of groups of hair fold down, and letting it widen and feather more towards the bottom than it feathers towards the top. And this one, a very simple hairdo, so centre part, long flowy hair, and a big sort of antenna hair on top. And then just keeping in mind that, again, that flow. And so this one could probably have worked fine with no front hair at all, with the hair just completely tied back, which is, again, fine. It just has a different sort of presentation of character when you do it. And then doing the top of the twin tails. So the top of the twin tails under a lot of weight. The bottom of the twin tails is not under a lot of weight. So that's why the hair will feather out and start to spread out and be affected more by its own curl than by the weight of the hair pulling down on it. And then we get to one of the more complicated hairdos here, where we've got the gap in the hair at the front to accommodate, or two gaps rather, to accommodate the horns coming through. So if you do have them towards the front, you've got to make plans for them and accommodate them in the hair you plan to draw. And so here we've got the hair being tied back and putting a hair ornament on there as well, with the ornaments being part of how you do the hair and how you plan them out. Just going through and doing some of the hair there, again similar to what we did before. So we'll start with the simple lines, then we turn them to ribbons, and then we detail them out. We add that detail after. And that's those hairdos done. So you can see how we've gone from just simple shapes, and then doing simple shapes in the front through to the back, and then feathering those shapes and keeping in mind things like that organic rhythm and how they're affected by weight. So let's begin then with the speed paint. We put all of these into practice into one single finalized illustration. So let's start then with the basic construction of the head, because this is going to be an illustration about the hair, so it's going to be a very close-up illustration, be very sort of head and neck focused. So we'll try and give that a level of sort of focus and intimacy as well, to get that sort of feeling of closeness and a sort of a character interaction between the character and the viewer. So we'll start then with just getting the facial features right, nailing out things like the ear placement, eye placement, getting a nice smile, and tucking the smile in a little bit, and then moving on to get the basic shapes around things like the head and neck. Now with that, I'll separate out the sketch here into the hair sections. You probably wouldn't do this for your actual illustration, but again, just to get that sort of point home, that we've got the masses of the hair at the front, the hair framing the face, and then the hair at the back. And we'll sort of put some volume in there to really show them up. And now with those done, we'll go in and do more of a refined sketch where we break up the hair and give it a bit more detail, and like we've done with some of the ones before, we'll merge some of those details in. So things like the side hair and the hair at the front, we'll pull them together, and then add a few extra little lines for things like where the hair feathers in. I like to have little bits of hair that come in around the face, so little sort of loose bits there, and then where the hair is hitting the shoulder, that's we're going to have it spilling out a little bit, and then that long section there that's hanging down, it's straight, but then towards the end where it has no weight, it starts to curl. So that's that same principle of how gravity affects it and how gravity will prevent the curl, but when there's no more gravity acting on it, it can curl just fine. And then doing the arm there, and just some fairly straightforward sort of clothing ideas, so something loose there that's not going to get in the way of the sort of the form of the hair. And then just some creases around for that, and just sort of penciling those in very straightforward, and a bit of hair maybe poking out under, because we want the hair to look like it's sort of getting everywhere, it's spilling out. And then starting again with simple ribbon shapes as the hair comes down, so not detailing them, just sort of getting them basically in, and having a bit, like you can see that little corner there where the hair's coming out, like we had that analogy with the road, the one that can't quite keep up the corner, so some loose bits coming out around the corner there. And then as the hair comes down and touches the table or the bed or whatever it is, I think it was bed for this one, you can see there that it's no longer affected by gravity at all, so it's just all curl. It all sort of wraps around, and without that force straightening it, it can be as rounded as it wants to be. So now coming back, these are the volumes we've used, so these are the solid colours, and then with those we can detail them out and add all those other bits in, like where the hair gathers behind the ear. But it's those volumes that we're using for all of these. So we don't have to note them out, but we do have to keep them in mind. And then adding maybe a bit of a strap there, and some more sort of lines for the fabric. Again, we're not going to be making the fabric much of a sort of focal point. We just want to make sure it doesn't disturb the image. The image is about the hair. You can sort of already tell that. And now penciling in a background, nothing too detailed. Again, we don't want anything to compete with the detail of the figure, so we're just going to do enough there to contextualize it, but not enough to compete with it. And then hardening in some of those shapes there. We're going to have the view from the window be just completely blown out white, and then that's going to how we light the character. The character's going to be lit from the window light, as a primary thing. So now we're going to get in and do the first pass of the line art. I do mine with just a standard hard round edge brush and max smoothing. I know a lot of people think that's probably a bit too much smoothing to get used to. I like it. I have fairly shaky hands, so it works quite well for me. But it does mean you have to be a bit more sort of patient with it. So if you want to have much lower smoothing, which you probably should do, by all means, there's no rules inherent here. So just doing those curls now, and adding some bits where it's sort of, broken up and coming away. And some other bits around the hair on the side there. And there's that little bit of spill as well, where it sort of comes out loose. And then doing the shoulder as well, getting those shapes right. Because again, we're not going to have much more than the hair as the focal point here, so we want to put everything so it doesn't disturb it, but it's got to be there as a form for the hair to sit on. So you can see here it's spilling over and it's folding in on itself as well. So it's very important, like we talked about with that rhythm, that you don't just have different shaped and sized sections, but you have the sections overlap as well. And now just doing a bit of a seam there on the clothing as well, because it's a very simple bit of clothing, so it's important to put a bit of detail into the clothing to make it sort of more believable. So one or two just little seams can really sort of nail that home. And now doing the eyes. I like to do the eyes last. You don't have to, of course. You can probably do it first to make sure they're going to work, but I like to sort of leave them till last. And then with that, we've got some of the sort of necklace detailing in, and we can then move on to the next step. Now normally here I would do a pass where I thicken the line art and give it sort of line weighting, but I wanted to do a quick fill in of colors here just so I can see whether the volumes are working. So the volumes are sort of the shape, so you've got line and shape and color, they're the elements of an image. I wanted to make sure before I moved on and did too much more with the line art that the shapes were working with the color. So I filled that one, the hair in, just because that's going to be the main shape there. So I want to make sure I'm red okay, because I wasn't sure about this image until probably right at the end. And then just adding some neutral colors in. It is one of those things where you'll see the skin tone and clothing looks quite dark there, but it's just that it's on that white background. Now here, I've got the Clip Studio speed paint over the top of it, just because following around the little darkening bits can be a bit sort of hard on the eyes. And you'll see with a lot of hair, it means you'll have a lot of those little V-shaped bits to put those bits of black or bits of darker line art in for ambient occlusion. So if you are doing a similar thing yourself, where you're putting little dark spots where the lines are sort of converging, if you have a lot of hair detailing, that's going to make that section of your work go for much, much longer. So this bit I've sped over, but there's quite a lot of little black spots between all the bits of hair there. And now just getting in some of the other colors, like the blue for the eyes, blonde hair, blue eyes as a sort of a thing. We've got the various sort of elves this season. We've got Marcel and a few others. And now just putting that green color behind all of the flats, just so we can see where we've missed, so where all little gaps are. And again, things like the eyes. So the eyes will look white, not because you filled them in with white, but because you forgot to fill them in with white. So the green can be very helpful there. And then just starting then with those details in, we can put all of that in a folder and we can start on the background. So we've made the sketch of the background visible, and we're going to make the figure a bit more transparent so we know where to bother with the detail. So we're not going to get the corner of the window frame exactly right because it's directly behind the head, so it doesn't matter. And now just getting the base shapes for those bits of background and trying to use as few colors as possible as well. So one of the things that will demand attention is contrast. And one of the kinds of contrast you'll get a lot of is color contrast. So if you have quite a lot of different colors going on in your background, that color contrast of all those different colors will demand attention away from your figure. So by all means do add things to your background, but don't make your background so strong that it will fight and win for attention against the figure if the figure is what you're doing. Now if you're doing an illustration that's about the scene or the place, then yeah, that's when you'd give the background or the landscape that extra contrast, that extra focus. In this case, the figure is going to be the main focus, so I'm not doing too much detailing and I don't want too much color contrast, so I'll be reusing a lot of colors. So you can see the picture frame is just a paler version of the window frame. and you can see that the little end table there is just the same as the other wood framing, so it's reusing those colors. Now with those, I've got the basic background essentially done, because again, I won't be detailing in the window because the window will be completely blown out. I'm going to have a very bright light coming in. Now here, I'm going to go over and start doing some of the shading, and I'm going to be using the lasso tool. Now you probably would have seen this one in the post-processing video, and the lasso tool is a really great way to drop shading very quickly. So you can do it and then fill it in with a soft airbrush, and then get your blending tool, and you can then blur some of the edges to make it look more sort of painterly. You can still keep the hard edges. The hard edges can also be great if that's what you're going for. It's a really quick way to do your tone. But in this case, I'm using it to basically get this one to the finish point fairly quickly. You know, get to the deadline, get the weekly release schedule out there, make sure the algorithm is happy with us all. And now here I'm doing a bit of an orange glow around the edge there. Now I won't really be doing any subsurface scattering on the figure, just because they'll primarily be backlit, so there's not much of an opportunity to do that, to do subsurface scattering on the figure, because there won't really be that hard light from the direct light source. It'll be mainly lit from behind. Now here we've got those in, so I'm just getting some of these bits of shading right that were a little bit sort of off kilter. And now I've got the lasso tool again, and I've got the fairly high amount of smoothing on the lasso tool just to make sure the shapes it does are nice and smooth and not too shaky. Again, you have to have the smoothing up all the way, but a little bit of smoothing on the lasso tool when you're going to be using it for painting like this can be really handy to give you that sort of smooth shape. And also remember, you can add and subtract, so hold Alt when you drag an area with the lasso to remove that as well. And then you can just use the magic wand and deselect areas of color. So I was drawing outside the line quite happily, and then once I've done, I just deselect all of the skin, clothing, and background. So I don't have to worry about keeping it in the lines. I just have to make sure I'm focusing on what parts of the hair I'm covering with it, so I can then shade them in. And then going over some parts more than once. And it's a good way of having that control over the tone with multiple passes. And then you can just go back over it again with like a soft airbrush eraser and then get rid of some detail. And so with that, I can then move on to shading the skin tone. Now the skin tone here, you can see it's coming out much too dark. So what I've done is I've cloned the flats and then grouped them to my shading layer, and then that grouped copy of the flats, I've set that to luminosity. I maybe darkened it a little bit so that it'll keep the multiply layer from getting too bright or too dark depending what surface it's on. More detail on that, of course, in the post-processing video. And now just shading in the clothing and trying to be fairly sort of loose with it. I don't want to pull too much detail and attention away from the figure. So just doing the same thing with the lasso tool to put those regions of shading, and then going in after with the blending tool, like you can see there, and smoothing some of those edges out, or getting in the hard brush to add some hard bits of detail and shading in. So it's a really good way of getting that first initial drop of tone in there, and also if you want to have like a bit of ambient occlusion, like you've got in there, so I can just set one area as being a sort of darker tone than the other. And then just doing the sort of the vinyl pattern for the choker and the strap there. That one's fairly straightforward again. You just want to make sure you remember it's not going to be shaded like a matte object is. It's a gloss object, so it's going to be more based on a reflection of the area around it. And just going over the eyes, don't have to get them perfectly smooth. In fact, a bit of difference in your bits of tone can really help. And then a bit of shading and erasing to give those eyes a bit more sort of detail and texture. And now I'm on to a second shading layer, just to add the darkest little bits that will give that sort of that bit of depth. So just where the light would really be having trouble reaching, just to give the sort of figure that extra bit of depth in some of those darkest little spots, like the creases here you can see in the hand. And with those, we're just going to go move on then to adding some skin tone variation. That one's a very subtle effect. It's just really good to add that variation to things, you know, ears and cheeks. Now here I've got a layer over the top of it set to multiply of just orange. What that does is it darkens everything and colorizes everything. And now when I cut that out, it essentially works like a highlight. So it gives a good sort of mood and atmosphere to it. So, you know, blue for nighttime, orange for sort of afternoon, evening. But it didn't quite get bright enough for what I wanted to do. So now I'm doing a big selection with the lasso again for large regions, and I'm going to blow these out and make them as bright as I can. So I'm just going to get that on the hair and then get the points fairly accurate where it would be picking up a lot of light from the window. And then once I'm done, I'm going to make it very, very bright. I'm going to make a glow layer with a bright color. And you can see immediately that one's really communicating that light coming through. Now the next thing I'm going to do to it, once I've done the rest of the highlights using that same first layer, because it's also a great layer to do your highlights on, is I'm going to make a layer above it to do a bit of a glow as well, because it won't just light things up, it'll also make a sort of a glow around those brightest spots. So on a second layer, I'm going to do that, and I'll also make sure that this is on the top of everything else, because I want that glow to show up over everything. So that's why it's coming through, and it's actually showing up above the chin. And then just going through a few post-processing things here, like softening the line art by getting it to take some color from the flats. So another copy of the flats to do for that. And then doing like a soft focus, and then duplicating the whole thing, blurring it, levels adjustment, setting it to overlay, then gradient map, and that's basically it. So now we've got our illustration that's based around hair. That's what it's all about. It's demonstrating the weight of the hair, the flow of the hair, and it came out okay. And I'm very glad that glow effect worked in the end. Wasn't quite sure about it. Now, there is homework to do, of course, so I'll include the link to that in the description. Have a go of that, and once you've had a go of that, take it over into the Discord if you like, to share with everyone there, and see what they have to say. Also share your art, hang out. It's a really good community we've got going. And also, like before, if you like what you see and you'd like to see more of it or see it more often, consider becoming a member on the Patreon. Again, a huge thank you to everyone who already has joined. That's really helped. It's helped me dedicate more time to this. So thank you from me and from everyone I've been able to give that support to. I'm really grateful for that. And if you have, of course, any questions, feedback, ideas for what you'd like in the classes when they start up, do put that in the comments. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you again soon. You have a great day. Cheers.